Close your eyes and try to forget the faces of Paul Newman or Emilio Estevez. Forget the image of the charming, rebellious youth who smiles as he draws a chrome-plated revolver. What history has hidden from you for over 140 years is the image of a 21-year-old boy with protruding teeth, hands calloused from brutal labor, and a gaze that period newspapers described as cold and devoid of remorse. Henry McCarty, known to the world as Billy the Kid, was not a symbol of freedom. He was a feral survivor of a morally bankrupt system. Hollywood taught us that Billy was a fast-talking hero. The documentary reality is that he was an exhausted fugitive. The myth says he killed 21 men, one for every year of his life. The historical evidence proves he was directly responsible for 9, but the number isn't what matters. It is the method. In this file we open today, we will not speak of legends. We will speak of real ballistics, shattered bones, and the inhuman physical strength required to survive a desert that never forgave a mistake. Billy was not a modern athlete. He was the product of a survivalist weightlifting that cinema never had the courage to show. Prepare yourself. From this moment on, the Old West stops being a movie and returns to what it always was, an open-air morgue for the young and the desperate. To understand Billy's strength, you must understand the ground he walked on. Lincoln County, New Mexico in 1878 was not a picturesque frontier town. It was a corporate fiefdom. On one side stood the House, a monopoly of corrupt Irishmen protected by politicians in Santa Fe. On the other was John Tunstall, an Englishman who saw in Billy not a hero, but a useful tool. Billy the Kid didn't spend his days in cinematic duels. He spent his days on the back of a horse, hauling hay bales, sacks of grain, and rifles that weighed nearly 10 pounds. The powerlifting of that era was not for aesthetics. It was functional. Imagine riding 40 miles under a blistering sun, on rationed water, maintaining control of a half-ton animal, while your fingers had to remain agile enough to operate the lever of a Winchester 73. Hollywood distorted this. They show us Billy in clean cotton shirts. The records of sheriffs and marshals describe men covered in a crust of dust and sweat that became a second skin. Billy's strength came from endurance. He possessed what the old-timers called steel tendons. These weren't inflated muscles, but a bone and muscle, density forged by chronic dehydration and repetitive strain. When he drew a weapon, it wasn't magic. It was the result of a body that had been in a constant state of physical high tension for years. He was a spring, wound tight by the violence of his environment. On the frontier, bravery was frequently a synonym for stupidity. Billy the Kid learned early that to live, one had to be brutal before being just. The event at the Lincoln Courthouse in April 1881 is the ultimate example of how human error and cold-blooded calculation dictated fate. Billy was in shackles, awaiting the gallows for the murder of Sheriff William Brady. James Bell, his guard, made the mistake that all dead men make. He lowered his guard. He underestimated the kid. Billy didn't use a card trick to escape. He used raw, violent force. During a trip to the outhouse, he struck Bell with his iron handcuffs, which weighed nearly 4 pounds. Imagine the impact of that heavy iron against a human skull. Bell attempted to flee, and Billy, staggering with leg irons still bolted to his ankles, shot him in the back with a pistol that had been hidden for him. Then came Bob Ollinger. Ollinger was the kind of man Hollywood loves to hate, arrogant, loud, and cruel. He was across the street when he heard the shot. As he ran back toward the courthouse, he heard a voice calling from the upper window. Billy was standing there with Ollinger's own double-barreled shotgun, loaded with heavy buckshot and coins. Billy did not hesitate. He gave no gentlemanly warning. He emptied the lead into Ollinger, tearing him apart in the middle of the street. Ollinger's error was believing his own legend as a tough man. Billy's success was understanding that, in that moment, he wasn't a man. He was a cornered animal with no intention of dying in a cage. Here we enter a detail that museums rarely emphasize, but which forensic records of the time noted with great curiosity. Billy the Kid possessed a physical anomaly that made him a nightmare for any jailer. His wrists were larger than the palms of his hands. This means that mechanically the standard handcuffs of the 1880s simply did not work on him. He could compress the bones in his hand and slide right out of the iron. He often left skin and blood behind, but he walked away with his freedom. Cinema ignores this anatomical brutality. Billy lived in a state of chronic pain from these escapes, but his desire to remain uncontained was stronger than his biology. Furthermore, there is the psychological reality. Sources like the Texas State Historical Association suggest that Billy suffered from a profound social isolation. He spoke fluent Spanish, lived among the Mexican population, and was more accepted by them than by white Americans. He was a stranger in his own land. This isolation created a man with nothing to lose. While the modern public looks for complex motivations, the documentary truth is that Billy operated under a simplistic code of personal vengeance. If you touched what was his, he would erase you from existence. He didn't fight for ideas. He fought for his own 4 feet of ground. The end of Billy the Kid was not a symphony of gunfire. It was a whisper in a dark room at Pete Maxwell's ranch. Pat Garrett, the man who killed him, was not a hero with a shining star on his chest. He was an opportunist, an ex-friend who knew Billy's habits. Garrett knew he could not beat Billy in a fair fight under the sun, so he chose the shadows. On the night of July 14, 1881, Garrett sat in the pitch-black darkness of Pete Maxwell's bedroom in absolute silence. Billy entered the room barefoot. He was hungry. Imagine the scene. A 21-year-old boy, hunted like a wolf for months, entering a dark room looking for a piece of meat. He sensed a presence in the dark. He asked, "Kines, Kines, who is it? Who is it?" Garrett did not answer with words. He answered with black powder. The first shot struck Billy just above the heart. The second went wide. Billy never had time to draw. He never had time to say goodbye. He slumped to the dirt floor and died amidst the smell of dust and burnt ozone. The real consequence was not justice being served. It was the melancholy end of a youth who never knew peace. Pat Garrett spent the rest of his life trying to profit from that death, writing books to justify what many at the time called a cowardly assassination. On the frontier, surviving often meant losing your soul. Henry McCarty, the Kid, was buried in an abandoned military cemetery in New Mexico. Over the years, the waters of the Rio Pecos flooded the site, shifting the coffins and the earth itself. The grave that tourists visit today is almost certainly symbolic. The land that created him eventually devoured him completely. We look back and see a romantic outlaw, but if we could step back in time and meet the real Billy, we would see only an exhausted young man, his hands scarred by iron and his body worn thin by the hunt. Hollywood lied to us because the truth is devoid of glory. The truth is that the Old West was a place where children became killers so they wouldn't become victims, and where the law was merely the side that had more ammunition. Billy the Kid died at 21. He never saw the 20th century. He never saw the world become civilized. He remained behind, trapped in an era of blood and dust, serving as a reminder that in real history there are no heroes. There are only survivors. And in the end, Billy wasn't one of them.